I was kind of hoping that that last gentleman would ask the comptroller if the Navy was going to get more money next year. The answer is probably going to be yes. Thank you, Jim, for that introduction and for the invitation to discuss the President's budget request for fiscal year 24, as well as key defense programs that support our Navy, Marine Corps, and our nation. And it's great to be with this wonderful audience of supporters of our Navy Marine Corps team. As a former small business owner for 17 years in the defense ecosystem, I understand the importance of capabilities and expertise that each and every one of you in this room brings to bear in support of the Department of Defense and the entire Joint Force. My relationship with the defense industrial base, as you know, stretches back even before my wife Betty and I decided to start our own very company. As a career Navy surface officer and former commanding of the Bulkley, DDG 84, I relied on the talents and the experience of industry partners to build, maintain, and deploy the ships that I served on. And it's that experience that I cherish tremendously, both in the Navy and the 17 years of private sector experience that followed, for me to be able to make decisions I now have to make. And today, in my role as CEO of the Department of the Navy, I am responsible for ensuring that our sailors and our Marines have the resources necessary to field combat capabilities to our fleet and our combatant commanders around the world to do the job that they have to do. Our nation faces great challenges around the globe. You all know this. In every region, in every domain that we operate in, from the seafloor to cyberspace, from the ocean surface to the skies above. And we do recognize that the People's Republic of China is our pacing challenge in the Indo-Pacific region, as they continue to rapid buildup of their Navy to a projected fleet size of 440 ships by the year 2030. In Europe, we continue to bear witness to acts of aggression by Russia and their violation of Ukraine's sovereignty, like the comptroller mentioned. The violence that we are all seeing against civilians fits the very definition of crimes against humanity, as stated recently by both President Biden and Vice President Harris, and we should not forget that. It is our sailors, our Marines, that are truly defending freedom around the world and working with our allies to do so. Iran and North Korea enduring in their campaigns as destabilizing forces in their respective geographic regions to distract from the issues that their regimes face at home amongst their own people. None of these challenges are easy to address without a credible and executable deterrent capabilities. That's the business that we're in, deterring our adversaries from wanting to do harm around the globe. And deterrence is the only effective if our potential adversaries believe that we, the United States of America, through our joint force, will actually prevail in conflict. Strong Navy and Marine Corps are the foundation upon which success of the joint force rests, particularly in the Indo-Pacific. And that is why we must always be ready to deploy a naval expeditionary force capable of meeting our defense obligations around the world. The challenges that our nation faces, coupled with our obligations to the American people themselves and our commitments to our international allies and partners, are always at the forefront of everything that I do as I lead this Department of the Navy. At last year's conference, which seemed just like yesterday, I introduced to this audience my 3 enduring priorities, which still to this day guide the actions and investments of the Department of the Navy. They are strengthening maritime dominance, building a culture of warfighting excellence, and enhancing our strategic partnerships around the globe. It is clear, it is bold, it is consistent. Over the past year, we have made significant progress tied to these priorities, in no small part due to the capabilities that our partners and industries have helped us deliver. And it's been a very exciting year. In support of our first priority, strengthening maritime dominance, we've achieved much in several key acquisition programs that many of you are a part of. We continue modernization efforts on the most survivable leg of our nation's nuclear triad. Construction continues on our first Columbia-class SSBN, the District of Columbia, with pre-construction activities already underway on our second class, the USS Wisconsin. We're upgrading our Block II F-18 fighter aircraft to Block III variant, ensuring we have enough fighter aircraft in our inventory to meet the requirements of the Joint Force. And we've made much progress there. Our fleet's newest aircraft carrier, the Gerald R. Ford, completed its first mini deployment this past year in preparation for its first full deployment later this year marking a milestone for the Ford-class carrier program. The lessons that we've learned through construction, outfitting, and operating the Ford will be critical as we build out the class with the future Kennedy, the Enterprise, and the Doris Miller. And I watched the progress being made on each of these ships very carefully. Construction on USS Constellation, the first of our Constellation-class frigates, has also begun. We look forward to adding a highly capable frigate back into our Navy's inventory to provide fleet and combatant commanders with additional maritime combat power. In addition to procuring these modern platforms, we're also expanding the areas available for our personnel to train. With our partners in Congress, through the National Defense Authorization Act of 2023, we are expanding and we're modernizing our training range at Naval Air Station Fallon, an endeavor that the Department of the Navy has been working on for years. And me and my naval team made it a priority as I came in as Secretary of the Navy to make sure that we get Fallon included in this presidential budget in the years to come as well too. This initiative will provide our pilots the airspace necessary to hone their skills in the advanced aircraft that we field. We also saw continued positive trends in ship maintenance periods. Yes, progress, due to the hard work that our Navy team has been doing for years, with delayed maintenance delays on large availabilities in private shipyards decreasing from 58% since fiscal year 19. In our public shipyards, the total number of delayed maintenance days has decreased from 29% since fiscal year 19, from 1,529 to 1,088. That doesn't mean there's a lot more work to be done. There's a lot more work to be done. But overall, we are observing on-time completion of maintenance availabilities improving at both private and public shipyards. And I know because I visit them often. I was just at BAE in San Diego and saw the progress that was being made with 4 ships there at BAE. This trend will continue to improve with the divestment of older platforms that are not fully deployable. Let me repeat that again. This trend will continue to improve with the divestment of older platforms that are not fully deployable. To our teammates in industry involved in this process, I thank you. I thank you for your hard work helping us move in the right direction. And I ask that you continue to engage us as we strive to improve maintenance performance throughout the fleet. On the innovation front, our sailors assigned to Task Force 59 in Bahrain continue to test and field unmanned surface vehicles in a challenging operating environment, developing concepts of employment for crewed and uncrewed platforms. And just the experiments that they're conducting and the ever-present ISR presence that they're maintaining in the Middle East is having a marked difference as we monitor the actions of Iran, for example, and their illegal shipments of illegal weapons to countries and terrorists around the world. I'm committed to increased investment in fielding autonomous systems as a path to modernize our Navy and our Marine Corps, and I look forward over the next several years to employing those new concepts of operations in other regions around the globe. But even more important than our warfighting platforms are indeed our sailors and our Marines, as well as the families who support them. Our people are indeed our greatest strength, and we continue to make it a priority to request funding to sustain and retain our people. From the largest pay raise in over 20 years to multi-million-dollar investments in family housing and quality of life programs, we continue to increase the benefits offered as part of our compensation packages to recruit and retain top talent. And it's making a difference. Retention rates are as high as they've ever been. Just last year, we've improved retention significantly in the United States Marine Corps, approximately 10%, and approximately 6 to 7% in the Navy. That's real progress. And in fact, if this excites you, I know I'm talking after lunch, but if this really excites you, some of us here, please see me afterwards so we can sign you up in the Navy and Marine Corps, okay? Beyond our relationships with our sailors and Marines, we continue to grow and enhance our connections with our allies and partners, my third priority. And one of our most visible relationships is AUKUS, bringing us closer as a Navy with our key allies, the United Kingdom and Australia. And I am so proud that just this Monday, I was in San Diego with President Biden as he announced along with his British and Australian counterparts, the next steps of the AUKUS partnership. Beginning this year, we will be welcoming Royal Australian Navy sailors and civilian personnel aboard our submarines and installations, as well as embedding them across our submarine industrial base to support them as they develop their own capacity to field nuclear-powered submarines. Assisting the Royal Australian Navy with the modernization of their submarine fleet will pay dividends as we continue to press for a free and open Indo-Pacific. This is a significant milestone that we should all be proud of. In Europe, the Department of the Navy identified and provided systems, platforms, munitions, and support equipment for our partners in Ukraine. We remain committed to doing our part in the President, Department of Defense's strategy to support the Ukrainian people as they defend their territory against Russian invasion. Our ties to nations around the globe are absolutely critical to our national defense strategy. We are stronger, standing together. We cannot and do not want to take on our enduring challenges alone. In fact, it is the single most advantage that we have as Western democracies standing together to deter Russia, China, and any other adversary from doing what they want to do. Equally important are our partnerships here at home. In particular, our department's relationship with the defense industrial base, as we work together to sustain the fleet and the force that our country requires. Recently, we saw the value of these government industry relationships play out with the successful resolution of the F-35 fighter jet issues. We also continue to support initiatives to grow and maintain a civilian workforce trained to meet our needs. There's no better example of this than the opening of our Additive Manufacturing Center of Excellence in Danville, Virginia, this past October. Graduates of this program will enter the workforce with critical needs that we need to support our fleet. These efforts will continue with an investment of over $2.3 billion in support to the industrial base over the FYDP alone. $750 million in the submarine industrial base last year in 23, and nearly a proposed $650 million this year. That is significant investment for the purpose of teamwork with all our industrial partners. Can we at least get a hand of applause from you folks? My God, I know it's lunchtime. And additionally, we created new opportunities for private companies to partner with us through the Naval Innovation Center, the Navy Postgraduate School in California, and the Marine Innovation Unit in New York. These two programs will serve as critical resources as we look to increase engagement with industry and academia to identify technologies and systems that bring advanced capabilities to our sailors and Marines. And I recognize that much of the innovation that's taken place over the last 10 to 20 years has truly been in the private sector. And we want to work with the private sector, integrate that technology, that talent, with the investments that we make in government, perhaps even in the higher riskier areas, for success, to be able to bring acquisition programs to our sailors and Marines that much faster. I highlight all of this to provide you with the tangible examples of how we, with your support, have made progress in advancing the capability and lethality of our Navy and our Marine Corps. We often hear about all the things that don't work, folks. Let me tell you, there's an inordinate amount of things that are working well, with industry and the government working together to advance these technologies and the development of these critical platforms. However, there's still much more work to be done. As proposed by the President's 24 budget request, it sets forth an extremely strong commitment to support our Navy and Marine Corps team, more so than we've seen in past years. The President's fiscal year 24 budget request unveiled this Monday is both a recognition of how far we've come during the past year and a plan to provide us the funding that we need to continue making progress across all three of those enduring priorities that line up with the Secretary of Defense's and our national security strategy. President Biden and Secretary Austin recognize the value a strong Navy and Marine Corps team provide in supporting our national defense strategy, especially when framed against the very threats that we face. The President's fiscal year 24 budget asks for $842 billion for the Department of Defense, a $26 billion or 3.2% increase over fiscal year 2023 enacted levels. Within this budget request is $202 billion for the Navy and $53 billion for the Marine Corps, representing a 4.5% increase in our department's budget over what was enacted in fiscal year 23. This is now the second year that the President has requested more than what was enacted by Congress. This year's budget supports the acceleration of Marine Corps' Force Design 2030 objectives while ensuring we are developing a fleet that supports the Navy's navigation plan. From development of next-generation platforms and systems, munitions procurement, of which there's tremendous investment, and shipbuilding, to critical infrastructure improvements, we are making smart investments that build a capable, credible, and lethal force. On the platform procurement front, the F-24 budget request calls for the purchase of 88 aircraft and 9 battle force ships, including 2 Flight 3 Arleigh Burke destroyers equipped with the Advanced Air and Missile Defense Radar. Of the $32.8 billion requested for shipbuilding, $10.3 billion is allocated for Virginia-class fast attack submarine program, including the procurement of 2 Block 5 hulls for fiscal year 24. One of these hulls will include the Virginia Payload Module, increasing its Tomahawk capacity from 12 to 40 missiles. Within our shipbuilding funds request are allocations to support advanced procurement for future construction of new ships and submarines. The consistency and the shipbuilding plan, to be released soon, provides our industry partners with a predictable ship and submarine build schedule, supporting acquisition of materials and identification of personnel requirements necessary to achieve on-time, on-budget deliveries, especially during those first 2 fit-ups. However, we cannot repair and maintain a capable fleet without the funding necessary to do so. For fiscal year 24, we are asking for the funding required to complete 100% of major maintenance availabilities conducted in private and public shipyards. 100%. We're also dedicating $26.9 billion to research and development, with a special focus on enhanced competitive capabilities. For next-generation platforms, we're investing $2.3 billion in the development of our next-generation fighter, as well as our next future advanced attack submarines and follow-on class destroyers. Additionally, we're requesting funding to support the amphibious combat vehicle development, software upgrades for ground-air task-oriented radar, and the integration and testing of the Marine Air Defense Integration System. We're adding almost $2 billion to our weapons programs, bringing the total to $6.9 billion. This increase supports an economical, multi-year procurement strategy for several types of munitions, including SM-6 and many others. The infrastructure to support a strong Navy and Marine Corps team is also a top priority. For fiscal year 24, we are requesting $6.1 billion to support 35 construction projects supporting the Guam Defense Policy Review Initiative, aircraft maintenance facilities, as well as quality of life improvements such as MWR facilities and child development centers. Folks, for too long we have neglected our infrastructure. And that matters as much to combat readiness as anything else that we deploy. And it's time to start closing that gap. Through our shipyard infrastructure optimization plan known as SIOP, we're investing $2.7 billion in our public shipyard infrastructure to include funding for the recapitalization of our aging dry docks, which in many cases have not been touched for years, for decades. They're 100 years old, and much of the surrounding buildings are 65 years old. I am proud that just this past week, we signed a $2.8 billion contract to begin work on our dry dock in Hawaii, Dry Dock 3 that will be renamed Dry Dock 5. These facilities are vital to the sustainment of our Virginia-class attack submarines and Ford-class aircraft carriers. Beyond our own shipyards, we're investing in our industrial partners, as I mentioned, and that includes $400 million in funding targeted at shipbuilder infrastructure, supplier and workforce development, technology advancements, and strategic sourcing. We're also requesting $380 million to support building the capacity of our weapons industrial base. We need you, our defense industrial base, to be just as strong and resilient as the sailors and the Marines that you support day in and day out. In closing, I highlight these select elements of the President's budget request for the Department of the Navy so that you can begin to identify areas where you can offer support, to include investments and innovations in your own companies that are complementary to ours. Our Navy and Marine Corps team grows stronger by the day and will continue to grow because of our relationships with you, our partners in industry. I thank you for everything you do in support of our sailors and our Marines. May God bless our sailors, our Marines, and their families. Thank you.
Go ahead, sir. A silly question, sir. I'm standing as far
A silly question? Don't ask it if it's silly.
away from you as possible.
No question is silly. Go ahead, Jim.
So every bill they mentioned, we're about 3 to 5% funding short. Is in terms of really what you need to resource for the mission. And then I did notice when you've got the Navy property, you've got the Marine Corps property. Bluntly speaking, what's the issue you're struggling with the MFIMs?
Okay, well, on the first note, I don't think we're 3 to 5% short on funding. Okay. I think this is an extremely aggressive budget increase that that the President has committed to, that the Secretary of Defense committed to, and I'm deeply grateful on behalf of the entire Department of the Navy for the investments that we've made, including, by the way, as the comptroller just mentioned, $500 million in inflation relief. Okay, there's always worse options, there's always a need for more resources, I get that. But my job is to balance all the challenges that we face across the Navy and the Marine Corps and try to seek the best return on investment for the American taxpayer.
Yes, sir.
So your second part of your question was about LSDs, right?
I think I forgot. Sir.
You forgot?
After the first meeting, I got the first part of the question. So.
Okay.
Yes, the second question was well.
The LSDs. Look, you want to reduce maintenance delays in the Navy to get the most bang out of the buck for the American taxpayer? Well, then get rid of those old ships that have been sitting in shipyards for upwards of 3 and 4 years. They're old, folks. As you open them up, you discover even more problem sets with them. They're very close to their extended service life. You may ask, why are they under their extended service life? Well, we've operated the living hell out of these ships. Proudly so. It's time to divest of them, okay, so we could get more of an investment for the American taxpayer and buy newer ships for our amphibious fleet, which is where I want to go in the future. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
Good.
Hi, sir. This is Caitlin Kenny with Defense One.
And by the way, let me just add something to that, Jim. I recently visited the Germantown, for example. Germantown's a proud ship with a proud crew, okay? We got a crane on the Germantown that has not been operated for 6 years. Of course, as the visiting Secretary of the Navy, the next question is, how could that be? Can we get the OEM here to come take a look at the crane and figure out what's wrong with the crane? Well, they've been there months trying to figure out what's wrong with the crane, and it hasn't operated. The wood deck on Germantown is starting to break through. Okay, she's the last LSD with the wood deck in the Navy. Do you know how much it costs to replace that wood deck? I don't know either, but I know it's a lot of money. Okay? And what I will tell you is, what am I going to get out of that? Am I going to get 1 more year of operation at the cost of $250, $300, $400, $500 million? Is it wise to put that money into this old ship when I'd much rather put it into the budget so I can buy a new LPD or more medium ship lift ships or something like that? I think it's the right choice. I'm sorry, ma'am, I cut you off. Who had a question?
Behind you, sir. Hi, Caitlin with Defense One. On buying LPDs, the CNO said that the increase in...
I'm sorry, you said I'm buying LSDs? We're not buying any more of those.
LPDs.
Oh, LPDs.
Sorry.
That was just a joke. Sorry, guys.
Off by 1 letter. He said that the increasing price of each new one was the driving issue for the pause and for the study of the ship. He also said that to bring the price down would mean a bundle buy, and my question is whether the Navy is possibly leaning towards buying more than 1 LPD every 2 years, especially with the early divestment of the 3 LSDs, or is that something that's too difficult because of the capacity of the shipyards?
Okay. On the first part, I think it's necessary to try to get to why is the cost of the LPD going up as significantly as it has. It's now approaching pretty much the cost of a DDG, Flight 3 destroyer. So there are some concerns to that. So we're going to actually take a look at that over the next few months, actually. And hopefully by either June or September, we'll have the final answer to, are there ways that we could perhaps bring that cost down a bit? To the second part of your question, I do believe in multi-year procurements, okay? And if in fact it is that the LPD is the right class to continue building well into the future, then what we should do is actually invest in multi-year procurements in greater numbers that meet our requirements to get us where we want to be in order to bring down those costs. And so I hope that that's the desired outcome that we eventually get to over the course of the next year by, hopefully the next presidential budget that gets submitted.
Mr. Secretary, here Council Lawyer in private practice, formerly I was interested in how things are going on plans for Red Hill, since that was such a major petroleum storage facility.
Right. We're pretty much on track with Red Hill. The Department of the Navy has been working very close with the Office of the Secretary of Defense and the Joint Task Force, providing all the necessary resources and people and tools and assessments to walk us through the defueling of Red Hill, followed closely by the closure of Red Hill, the permanent closure of Red Hill, which I'm entirely responsible for. And so we've been working with the Department of Health in Hawaii, exchanging our closure plan. We recently submitted supplement number 1, for example, got a bunch of Q&As that we responded to, and the next supplement that we'll be submitting is supplement 2. But I like to think that we remain on track. We're very dedicated to doing the right thing by Red Hill, by our sailors, by our Marines, our airmen, our soldiers, everyone who lives in the state of Hawaii, as well as the citizens of Hawaii, to defuel Red Hill and then to permanently close Red Hill.
Sir, Justin Captain, Breaking News.
Hey, Justin, good to see you.
You too, sir.
We only have reporters asking questions here today? What's going on? Go ahead, Justin.
So one of the things that I think struck a lot of people who watched the Navy's budget very closely last year was the decision to include 3 options in your shipbuilding plan rather than just lay out one route.
Sure.
Understanding the shipbuilding plan is not up yet, I was wondering if you could comment on whether your shipbuilding plan will follow suit or if it will not.
Yeah, unless things change dramatically, I think it will. It'll have 3 options there, and I think that's a good strategy. It provides options for future leaders to be able to make decisions based on the current threat of the day. The takeaway, however, Justin, is that read the shipbuilding plan. Don't just look at the pictures. Read it. Look at the numbers, okay, associated with the plan. And if you look at the numbers very carefully, you'll see that in the first 10 years of that plan, the numbers don't change. And that's important because the industry does need a steady signal of what our intentions actually are. But I don't know, Justin, maybe I'll ask you, what will the world look like in 10 years from now or 15 years from now?
Sir, it's not my job to answer those questions.
It's not, right? Well, it's hard to predict. And I think what having the 3 courses of actions there allows current leaders and future leaders, both in Congress and in the executive department to do, is to be able to have the flexibility necessarily to look at those different options. But again, I go back to the fact, take a look at the numbers in those first 10 tables, and you'll see a tremendous amount of stability and flexibility, even compared to last year.
Secretary? Hi.
We're done?
No.
Oh,
Al Schaefer, I have a question. And this relates to China being the pacing threat.
yes, sir.
As we look at China, at least in part of my feeble brain, that suggests we need to go underwater more than on the surface. Are we looking at the mix between submarines and surface fleet and in response to that challenge?
Have you seen the budget numbers for submarine investment?
Well, we have to grow the shipyards. Yeah.
I mean, Virginia payload module, Columbia, looking at extending the life of our Ohio hulls as well too. And take a look at the other investments in the nuclear triad as well too, right? Modernization of the D5 missile.
I was ASN RDA in the last administration.
Oh, okay.
I got it, yeah.
Yeah, so yes, the answer is yes. And actually, a large proportion of our budget actually goes under the sea. At the same time, though, I want to be able to decom some of those cruisers so we can actually invest more money in DDG Flight 3s, for example, Arleigh Burke Destroyers Flight 3, so that we can get more of those out there and get more frigates out in the future as well, too. And so that's the sort of the trade space that we work in. But you got to have both. It's not just undersea, it's the surface, it's air, it's everything else. And that's why you see the major investments in NJAD, for example, that are coming into the future as well, too. And I'm very proud that we've actually closed some of the gap on FA-18 E&Fs. We're also fully committed to F-35, buying 75 across the FIDA, 15 every year. The Marine Corps is purchasing 4 every year as well, too. So it's, I think the investments are being made the right way.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Anyone else?
Yes, sir. Can I throw out the last one?
Absolutely, Jim.
We have General Berger getting mic'd up in the back.
Awesome. I may stay for his
They're feeding him raw meat, sir.
for his presentation.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. His exec's over there tossing him.
I'll tell you, folks, since I came in, almost 2 years ago now, I have been so proud to work with Admiral Mike Gilday and General David Berger. And General Berger, as we talk about Force Design 2030, I don't need to tell you how transformative he's been. And I have supported both of them, actually, in development of the Navy Op Plan and Force Design 2030.
Yes, sir. And the closing message, and we'll make it a clean break as you go off and come up on, will be what's the message to Congress in terms of divided government, potential full-year CR, BCA, something like that. What's the message in terms of the impact of the China fight?
With regards to divided government?
If you end up with a full-year CR, if you end up with
No, we can't afford to end up with a full-year CR. That would be irresponsible and fall short of our national security priorities as a nation. This is not a Democrat issue. This is not a Republican issue. This is not an independent issue. This is an American issue. It's a democratic issue from the sense of Western democracies all working together. And we see it everywhere we go, the commitment to increase their budgets basically where they haven't been before, right? And the agreement to actually work together. Japan and the Philippines, Australia, India, all these Western democracies, we've got to do our part, which also means Congress has to do its part to make sure that we pass an NDAA and an omnibus bill on time. And I'm fully committed to working with the Congress to try to resolve any questions or issues or balance and compromise are my 2 favorite words to try to get to an NDA and an omnibus bill that we could all support and move forward with. Hopefully that answers the question. Yeah.
Also,
Thought you were going to ask me about divided government. I can give you another hour lecture on divided government, but
I can't even spell that. Please, thanks, everyone.
thanks, everyone.